Oops. Okay.
Amazing.
We're live. Welcome, everyone. I'm Alon Ben Joseph, CEO of Ace Jewelers. You're here on the Ace List Live. First one of 2025, our 50th anniversary. And I'm very honored to have my dear friend Nicholas Bowman-Scargill here in Amsterdam on a very special day, because today is the official launch day of the dealership of Fears watch company at Ace Jewelers, exclusive in the Netherlands. So
Brilliant.
Congratulations to you.
No,
Thank you for the trust.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for the honor to represent Fears in the Netherlands. I am in love with the brand because those that have been following me know that I have not one but two.
Yes.
So
You've got more fears than I have today.
Yeah. The honest truth is this was my first one.
Yes.
But my mom fell in love with it. So I actually gave it to my mom. I brought it back for today to represent it during our launch party tonight. So if you're watching during this live stream and you want to join us, please do send us a DM and we'll see if we have a spot on the waiting list for you to join us tonight in Amsterdam during the launch of the brand. We've been doing press meetings. Well, you have actually.
Yes.
I could sit down relaxed. He's on the go. He's fired up. Nicholas, you know that we kick off the Ace List Live with 7 standard, the Ace List questions.
Oh, yes.
So I'm going to dive in to those. But before, we have a tradition that we always kick off with a wrist check of what are you wearing? Because I just showed what I'm wearing.
You have, no, superb. Well, I'm wearing a very special watch. So this is Fears number 1.
Please take it off. We'll put it on the screen. Fears number 1.
Number 1. This is the very first watch to carry my family's name on the dial from 2016 when I restarted the company.
And this is museum grade.
Basically, well, it's been worn and beaten up, and it's one of my personal Fears watches that I own. I bought from the company, and I wear this watch on special occasions. It's beautiful. My lucky charm.
It's beautiful. So thank you for sharing. How many do you have in your collection?
So
personal collection.
I have 3 watches, 3 very significant watches. The temptation is to buy all the watches.
Yeah,
right?
You're very modest.
You know, I've the watches are there for other people to enjoy, but I have 3 which are very keen. So this one, I then also have the first Brunswick White, so the first of the mechanical Brunswicks from 2017. And then I also own one of the Fears Christopher Ward Alliance 01 jump hours from the 50-piece limited run from 2023. And they all mark different milestones in the company. So they're all very, very important watches. And so therefore I had to have one in my own collection.
Lovely, lovely. That's beautiful. For those that have never seen the Aces Live before, although this is the 56th episode, this is a AMA, as they call it. Ask me anything. So we're streaming live. You can ask us any question you want. Just type it in. We'll see it on the screen. This is an example. Daniel Mitchell on YouTube wrote, "Hi, Alon and Nicholas. What a great brand for you to add. Perfect fit." Thank you, Daniel. We appreciate it. Thank you for tuning in and commenting. So keep the questions coming. Some people can join the live stream. They sent in their questions beforehand. We'll try to deal with the questions at the second, or actually the third part of the show. So first question, Nicholas.
Okay, right.
What watch and or jewel is your favorite and why?
Oh, okay. I'm going to go with a watch. Even though years and years ago I used to work in a jeweler's, so I know my diamonds incredibly well, and I have diamonds in my wedding ring. Got married on my 6th anniversary, so I have 6 diamonds in my ring.
Lovely.
Sadly, my husband didn't agree to add an additional diamond every anniversary because, you know, we'd be up to nearly 20 stones.
You know, we do that sometimes, people. We add it on the inside of the band for men. On the outside of women. So we add. So
I need
after
to
30
bring
years, you
him
have a
here.
problem.
Exactly. So I clearly have to bring him
Here,
in
yeah.
store. But in terms of watch, there's one watch that is, and I'm not going to use the cliche, a grail watch. It's a watch that I just have always loved since 2012 when it came out. And it's made by Hermes, the Hermes Le Temps Suspendu. And apologies to any French speakers. I'm British. I don't speak any foreign languages, unfortunately, so I've probably butchered the name. But this is an incredible mechanical watch because it has hour and minutes and then a retrograde date. And then at the push of a button, the hands snap to an imaginary time. The minute hand is a few minutes before 12. The hour hand is just after 12. So it's a made up time and the date snaps and disappears. But the watch keeps running mechanically. And then when you press the button again, it knows where to set the time to. And for me, this is incredible because it's that romance of how time, yes, is 60 minutes, 12 hours, 24 hours in a whole day. But actually, we all know that when you're, a summer's afternoon around a friend's, having a barbecue, a couple of beers, it feels like time has paused. 5 hours feels like, 5 minutes. But we also know how much longer a commute to work is than coming home in the evening. But I love this idea of when you're in a special moment, you just press a button and time pauses, or the French, suspended. And the incredible thing is, I've loved this watch for many, many, many years. And I was at an event in Geneva talking to someone, and I said, they asked me a similar question, what's your favorite watch? And I said, it's this watch. And they said, follow me, let's go outside to the smoking area. And I was like, okay. So we step outside, and he introduced me to the father and son team who developed the complication for Hermes.
Amazing.
And the technical side of it is incredible because each hand is actually a 359-degree retrograde. So it looks like the hands go around, but they actually go and in a split second snap back. And the movement was hypothetical until they could develop components in silicon, because the metal would shear with the snapback. So it's technically incredible, but also very romantic. So that's my favorite watch.
Amazing. So I don't need to ask, did you ever dream of doing a collab with Fears and Hermes? Because the answer is known.
Absolutely.
Let me rephrase. Would you dream of doing those kind of complications on the Fears brand?
One day, yes. I think, I'm old school when I come to complications. A complication is something that has to be very special beyond just time. So obviously a date is complicated and things. But I like the romantic, and I like the moments where you go, even if you're not a watch person, you go, aha. So, a more well-known complication, like things like perpetual calendars. If you explain to someone on the street what a perpetual calendar is and it does it mechanically, their mind is blown. It is just absolutely incredible. When you explain the Temps Suspendu from Hermes, people just can't believe what they're seeing and understanding. And I think that's the beauty of watchmaking. So one day, I'm a long way from it, but one day, special romantic complications.
Explains the jump hour. Could
Exactly.
we say that it has that touch of magic, that fun of seeing time differently and jumping? Because this actually brings tranquility to me, and it's fun because you focus on the minute hand, and I dissect it in 4 quarters.
Yes. Yeah.
So, but it gives you less stress because it's not to the minute, although you can read the minute. So interesting. Lovely. I'm actually happy I asked you that question. Second question, Nicholas. What did you want to be when you grew up?
A train driver.
Really?
Yeah. I've always had
steam train.
No, modern trains. So a few things to clarify here. I'm not a train spotter. I'm not on the end of a platform writing down numbers. And interestingly, steam trains, I appreciate a bit like a mechanical watch, the fact that it doesn't have electricity. A steam train can go hundreds of miles an hour using water, coal, fire, but my fascination with railways has always been with the current, the contemporary. And I don't know where this comes from, but since I was a kid, absolutely obsessed with trains. And I really wanted to be a train driver. You know, the idea of driving a train up and down the country absolutely fascinated me. And actually, when I did my career change and became an apprentice watchmaker at Rolex, the other career option I properly investigated was becoming a train driver.
Really?
And it's not just because as a train driver, you don't get the opportunity to wear as many Savile Row suits, but it's, you know, about the, you know, your passions and which direction they take you. But if I had gone down the train route, there would be no fears today. So yeah.
Amazing. So important for our viewers, Fears is not a new startup. It's not a new brand. It's actually a very old brand. And you are 6th generation, but 4th general manager.
Correct.
Did I remember that correctly?
Yes. It sounds a bit confusing, but
yeah,
it highlights a good point about the fact that we're old and new.
Yes.
Which then makes people go, what, how, why? That sounds... And it's because we're very open about the fact 39 years, Fears was dormant. It was closed.
Yeah.
And so that's why we skipped 2 generations on the family tree.
Yeah.
But I'm then the 4th managing director.
So in those daydreams as a child about being a train conductor, was there any thoughts of the old Fears company, or because there were 2 generations gap in between, that dream was also dormant?
Very much so. And I mean, the crazy thing is, when I was a kid growing up, even when I started and got my apprenticeship at Rolex, I didn't know Fears existed.
Yeah.
I didn't know it was in my family's history. So I didn't grow up with the stories of old. You know, it was very much this old company closed in the 70s.
Yeah.
You know, everything had been sort of, you know, thrown away. Everything had been shut down. And no one thought of talking about it, because nowadays we think of different crafts, different skills, and people appreciate them.
Yeah.
Back in the 70s, running a watch company wasn't a glamorous thing to be proud of. It was something you did. It was a job, you know, it was a company.
Yeah.
And so when the family business closed, it was sort of largely forgotten, you know. But I'll be honest, I'm very glad I didn't know about Fears from a young age, because we were talking a bit earlier today. I've gone through quite a few different career changes. You know, when I was at school, I worked in a jeweler's selling watches and diamonds. I did a degree in pure economics, so I've got an economics business background. I did an internship with Deutsche Bank. I was going to become an investment banker. But in 2008, when I graduated, the whole financial world blew up in my face and I had to look for a new job. I then, for 3 years, worked in public relations. So I was then in marketing. Then got my apprenticeship at Rolex, which meant that when I was 29 and left Rolex to bring my family's company back to life, inadvertently, I had actually built up quite a useful skill set in different industries and different. Whereas if I'd known about Fears, the temptation might have been, don't go to university, just try and set it up. And that would have been in 2005, which, yeah, it's never easy to set up a watch company, but at least in 2016, people were interested in new companies. We had Instagram. We had ways of communicating around the world. 2005, you know, the watch world was completely different then. It would have been such a more difficult thing to do. But also, I don't think I would have done it any better. You know, I wouldn't have had the skills, the maturity. I mean, I think even now, 8 years in, you kind of, you know, occasionally you take a rare moment to look backwards and you go, my goodness, if I was to restart Fears next year in the 180th anniversary, rather than when I did in the 170th anniversary year, how much more I've learned, how much more I know, you know, what, but, you know, hindsight's always a beautiful thing.
It's all about timing. That's interesting, and no pun intended. Third question. Who is your role model? Or you can mention more role models.
Oh my goodness. Who is my role model? It's difficult because there's role models in terms of from a business standpoint, and then there's role models in terms of, you know, for anyone who follows my personal Instagram, I'm very into clothing and, you know, things. So different areas. My role model is someone who actually passed away before I really got into watches. Only someone I know kind of through stories I've heard. And it was a gentleman called Gunther Blumheim, who he's one of those names that he should be as revered as, Jean-Claude Biver, Nicholas Hayek. He's of that generation. He's one of those significant individuals who basically changed and helped spearhead the modern watch industry. And for those who don't know, he was at IWC, believe Jaeger LeCoultre, but he was Lang & Söhne.
He was actually at the foundation of the rebirth of
exactly, but he was someone who he had a technical background. He came from engineering. He worked for a company called VDO, which made like dials, and they owned some of these. He helped bring the Richemont group together of brands. He helped spearhead new marketing. I mean, IWC nowadays, you wouldn't be able to get away with this, but the IWC adverts were all about like real men wear an IWC and like this idea of watches becoming luxury. And as you say, with Lang & Söhne, I mean, a company founded 1 year before Fears. It's fascinating how, without the energy he brought to it, he brought it very quickly to the forefront of collectors. But he died in his 50s. He had a heart attack. I believe he died at his desk. He was a complete workaholic. He never had a computer. He used to get emails printed out and put in front of him, including forum posts. So people were talking about the brands on forums. His PA would print them out and give him a stack of paper. But what I admire is the fact that he was technical, but he also understood the romance and and what a modern luxury brand should be. Way before consultants were using this sort of language, way before people were talking about it on on live streams. So as I say, a very unknown individual, and if you Google him, there are almost nothing written about him. But I've had the pleasure over the last few years of beginning to meet more people within the Swiss watch industry. And, you have to be delicate here, but if you think you're chatting to someone who's of a generation and an age where they might have interacted with him, I'll always ask the question. And it's lovely to hear the stories, because most people who have been in the Swiss watch industry for 30, 40 years, they knew him, worked with him, and they're all in awe of him. And everyone says the same thing, basically going like, he's kind of one of the unsung heroes. So someone to Google, someone to look into, definitely.
Thank you. Interesting. Nice curveball.
Yeah.
So the fourth question was born during the foundation of the Ace This Life, that we couldn't travel.
Yes.
So we took it to teleportation. But it's a still relevant question. If you could teleport tomorrow, where would you go?
I'd probably go to the North Yorkshire Moors.
Really?
Yes. It's not very exotic, but Beers is based in Bristol. That's where I am Monday to Thursdays. But my home is up in North Yorkshire. My father is from West Yorkshire. I'm from Bradford, so I'm proud of my half Yorkshire blood. But the North Yorkshire Moors is a very beautiful, special place. It's a national park. It's very, it's quite barren. It's high up. You drive up onto the moors. It's they have heather and bracken. Very sort of it is a very, very beautiful place. And for me, it's a place that is very peaceful. And when you're up there, you really kind of feel very insignificant, which I think is actually very important. Quite often I will, drive up there with my husband and we'll go for a walk. And there's no mobile signal because there's no mobile masks. It's so beautiful. Look at these paths that you can walk through. And if you sit on that bench, how is that not inspiring? There's a reason they call Yorkshire God's own earth. Like it's such
God's
beautiful
own earth.
Yes.
Wow.
And
that's almost pretentious.
Yes. Yeah.
Okay. So, beautiful. See, a travel tip. That's why I asked these questions.
Yeah. I would just want to be dropped there immediately, because to get there, even from York, is over an hour in the car. It's quite a long, complicated drive. But yeah, that would be, I'd say, one of my sort of happy places. And you almost never see anyone there. It's very barren, but beautiful.
Beautiful. Thank you for sharing. Fifth question. What book are you currently reading?
Oh, okay. So on the flight over yesterday on the KLM, I thought, right, it's an hour-long flight. Rather than getting my laptop out and working as normal, I thought I'm just going to read my paperback, And immediately my colleagues were like, "Oh, what are you reading? That looks interesting." And it's a book my mother got me, and it's by a lady called Kate Bingham, and it's basically all about the UK's vaccination during the pandemic, and she. Working for a biotech venture capitalist firm, was brought in by the government on secondment to set up the vaccination task force. And she's written this book basically talking all about how the UK was one of the first countries in the world to have vaccines approved and bought en masse. And I'm not saying this as a British person trying to be like, oh, didn't we do so well in the pandemic? But this book,
The long shot,
which I love a good pun, but it's a fascinating story of how do you do the impossible? How do you shrink a 10-year, which is usually from first conceiving a vaccine to it being approved? How do you shrink that into 10 months? And then how do you do it? And bringing even down to things like supply chain. So like the Pfizer vaccine, which was made in Belgium, it has to be kept at ultra low temperatures. So how do you have special cases for it? And they deciding it's got to go through the Channel Tunnel rather than flying, because flying can get to, all these logistics, and working with healthcares and governments, and you read this book, and my mother bought it for me, basically going, look, this isn't a business book, but it's incredibly inspiring to see what individuals can do when they're really being pushed. And I'm now down to, I think, like the final chapter of it, but I would highly recommend reading it. And if anyone who's scared about reading it because it brings back memories of the pandemic, it touches on the actual pandemic and the difficulties quite lightly. This is very focused on the day-to-day. And I really highly recommend reading it. Certainly if someone runs a business or anything, this book it's a very good business book without being a business book.
I understand.
Yeah.
So, as I know you love to learn, very eager, do you also read novels, or is it often these, I'll call them business case studies?
Yes, I've always, since a kid, and I'm quite dyslexic, so reading's always been quite a challenge for me. I tend to gravitate more towards reference books, non-fiction. That's very much my go-to. I mean, my viewing on, I don't own a TV, but if I'm going on YouTube, I tend to watch documentaries about things, rather than sort of fiction. But I do enjoy fiction.
Have 55 episodes.
Exactly.
So Mr. Bowman, you have 55 hours of quietness at home.
Exactly. But no, I do enjoy some fiction, but I set myself a target of reading one book every month. And for me, it's about, and I also have a thing, if I start a book, even if I'm not enjoying it, I have to finish it. And I think that goes back to my school days when I struggled to read. And so finishing a book was a real challenge. And so I think I try and alternate. I think the next book I read will be maybe more, if not fiction. I've got a very good biography of Frank Sinatra I want to delve into. And that's nothing to do with business. That's just my love of Frank Sinatra, So I try and alternate between the two.
Lovely. Sixth question. What do you think is going to be the color of 25? We're at the beginning of 25. You probably have decided all the colors for Fierce for 25.
Wow.
You can push it into 26 if you want.
Well, I mean, it's difficult because I did read an email last week from Pantone. The color for the official color.
Mocha, chocolate, mocha,
cappuccino. Chocolate fresh, chocolate something. It's like a metallic light mocha, which is a beautiful color. But we've already seen that before. I know Nomos did a beautiful range, the tobacco dials. I think it's going to be difficult because we've seen over the last few years, there was, green dials, purple, right now we're living in the stone dial era. It will be interesting to see if a new color comes out. And what I tend to do is, if you want to pick up early on color and trend, Rolex and Patek, it was when they bring out a certain color, then other people will jump on it and start working with it. I don't know if this year is going to be one specific color. We've been through the very, very colorful phase. So, you know, when those OPs came out from Rolex during the pandemic, suddenly everyone had bright yellow, orange, green, you know, corals. I wonder if now we're going to see maybe more muted tones. So not like pastel tones, but just, I think there is an era of kind of the classy tones. So going back to Pantone, that sort of like metallic pale mocha, you know, kind of thinking more, if you were to walk into a Brunello Cucinelli store, though, you know, what are the colors you're seeing? Very calm colors. I think that's an area people haven't explored enough. And these are very livable colors. You know, don't get me wrong. I will happily wear a watch that's a bright color, but I also like things that are very, you know, quite muted and elegant, you know.
So I pulled up your website, your beautiful website. I'm wearing a coral one.
Yes.
How do you get to coral? You've done cherry red.
Yes.
So you do 2, 3 stellar timeless dial, silver, black. Boutique editions are green.
Yes.
Yes. They seem emerald.
We call it mallard green.
Mallard.
So like the head of a drake duck.
Hardly anybody uses mother of pearl anymore. You guys went all out. Natural.
Well, it's an interesting story behind that. We were at a point where we were about to prototype and decide, and this is going back a couple of years, were we going to go down a route with stone dials or mother of pearl? And this is before this all happened. So what's very interesting is independently, different people come up with different things. So before people were talking about stone dials, I've always been into sort of dress Piaget watches. I've always admired stone. And I thought, you know, maybe this is time to revisit it. No one's really doing it outside of Piaget and Rolex. And then one day I was on a morning run and I just suddenly thought, mother of pearl. And the reason I thought it was I knew I was going to be wearing these cufflinks.
Yeah.
And these cufflinks my parents bought me, I think, when I was 16, and they're inset with little pieces of MOP. And I absolutely love MOP. You know, I'm a big fan of the Art Deco period. And go back to the 30s, people had lighters, cases, business card cases, things. They used MOP a lot for men and women. Recently, MOP has ended up being it's very obvious. It's usually very garishly toned, usually covered in diamonds. It's usually exclusively on a lady's quartz watch. And there's nothing wrong with that. But it's an incredible material and it's natural. And I think I have a real love of rarity as part of luxury. When something is actually rare, not rare by any kind of false sense of scarcity, but by the fact it is rare and it's special and it's beautiful, and nature can be incredibly beautiful. And so I think MOP is, it's something that has been kind of a lot, really underutilized. And so it was back in, my goodness, we're in 25 now. So it was the end of 23. We launched our first Aurora with the blue pieces of MOP. And then we followed it up last autumn with the pink orchid with 2 pieces of pink MOP.
Which is lying here.
Yes, we have it here in store. And what I like is how people's reaction to it. And I think also it's interesting, as the world has gone down very much a stone dial route, it's almost inadvertently we've zagged rather than zigged, you know.
And you've zagged and zigged impressively, because one of my favorite collabs you've done is with our mutual friends Asher and Gabe of Collective Horology in South California. Is you guys went for an onyx dial.
Yes.
So the obvious route would have been lapis, malachite green, turquoise, tiger eye.
Yes.
So why did you guys go for onyx? Because you have to look twice to understand it's not lacquered, it's not enamel.
Oh yeah,
there are no veins in the stone. You guys chose a beautiful black, flush black.
It's a pure black. Yes, and I mean, you think if you look at some of the onyx style Rolexes, the only reason you know they're onyx is because they always put a metal window around the date. Whereas if it's lacquer, they let the lacquer fall. So if we go back to, right in the early days of Fears, within the first few months of Fears being restarted, I was having a beer with a very good client of ours who actually works in marketing, a lovely American chap called Josh. And he just said to me over a drink, he said, I've come up with this amazing tagline you should use. And I thought, here we go. I'm going to have to pretend to be excited. It's a good client. And like,
you pretend?
No.
Ever?
Well, the problem is I don't have a poker face. So I thought, oh my goodness, if it's bad, I'm going to smile and he's going to know. Anyway, he said this tagline, which is now we own as a registered trademark, which is elegantly understated since 1846.
Yeah, I love that.
And elegance and understatement, I think, are very British traits. So when we were looking at this, and Asher, Gabe, and myself, and our designer Lee were coming up with different concepts, they wanted something very technical. They wanted something with that smooth black. And we weren't thinking, I'll be honest, we weren't thinking of this in terms of it being a stone dial, but we were thinking of this in going, if you want the purest, like smoothest black, it's onyx. It's not lacquer, it's onyx. And so that's the route we went. Now it's very interesting because with hindsight and reflection a year later, we're looking at this, and someone said to me the other day, they said, oh yeah, Fizz did a stone dial recently. And like you've just said, and reminded me of this. And I was like, oh yes, that is a stone dial, but because it's a very Fizz way of doing it, and we're using the material for the objective rather than the material being the objective.
Did you consider black jade?
No, it was I think the thing with onyx is you can get that real pure smooth and the full black much easier.
Yeah, and black jade is more rare and it could be opaque.
Exactly.
Or milky.
And that's the beautiful thing of natural stone. But we know with onyx going for this like real pure.
You needed black essence.
Yes,
literally. Yeah. Did you consider Vanta black?
No, I didn't. I like Vanta black. I think though with this, it was about the gloss. We wanted that real, like, where you're looking at something and it feels like you're looking in a dark pool rather than into a black hole.
I understand.
Yeah, but I do love Vanta black. I think that's every time I see it, I have that one of kind of those giddy moments of being like, what am I looking at? It's kind of, it really puzzles the mind. You're thinking like, it's like an optical illusion. You're kind of going, this shouldn't be doing this. Are my eyes okay? Like, the
vast void.
Exactly.
Last question. You're doing well. You're a chatterbox.
No, sorry.
No. Don't apologize. That's what we want you for. You're an easy guest interview. So thank you. You're making my life easy. So usually we record this with my guest sitting on the other side of the world, but you're here in Amsterdam. So this question seems silly. You're here. You've been here because we posted a picture here.
Yes.
That your lovely mum took.
Yes.
So it's an honor to meet mum. But you've been here. So second part of the question, what do you love about Amsterdam?
What I like about Amsterdam, or what I love, I should say, and I actually was mentioning this earlier today in one of my interviews, is I love European cities. And they have such different feels to them. You go from Milan to Paris to London to, Geneva. What I like with Amsterdam is it feels like a lot of places together. At the same time, it's very individual. So what I mean by that is, and I was walking here this morning from my hotel and I was thinking, it's got a sense of cleanliness and safety that you find in Switzerland, but you've also got the fun and excitement and kind of creative buzz that you get in places like London or some of the German cities like Berlin. But then you've got the beautiful architecture that you would find in the boulevards of Paris, but obviously with the very distinctive, Dutch take on it, which is incredible. I mean, you've got more water than there is in Venice, which is amazing. The canals are just, but then you look at, the fact that, we've got the electric trams. I don't know what I'm more worried about when I'm crossing the road, being run over by a tram or a cyclist. the fact is the cars are fine. I feel safe around the cars,
Yeah.
but it's the fact that you've got all this kind of clean living and all of this coming together, amazing food, amazing culture. I think the thing with Amsterdam is it is that kind of ultimate of European cities because it's got all these things and yet it's distinctly different.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think that's I was thinking this morning, I think this is my 5th trip, but I've always come to Amsterdam for very different reasons. And this is why, one of the reasons I'm so pleased to be working with you is it means there'll be more excuses for me to come in a business capacity.
Exactly.
But no, it really is truly a wonderful city.
Lovely. Thank you. So thank you. Those were the 7 questions. For our dear viewers, if you have questions for either Nicholas or myself, shoot them. We'll project them here and we'll answer them as well.
Yeah.
Before we do so, I want to do a little deep dive into fears. So through these questions, we dealt and we touched upon some of the topics.
Yes.
Almost 180 years old.
Yes.
You're the 4th general manager, 6th in the family line.
Yes.
Bristol. Understatedly elegant. Did I say that correctly?
Elegantly understated.
It's exactly the opposite.
Yeah.
Does it mean the same though? Yeah.
It
no,
does.
actually it doesn't.
I suppose the only thing you didn't infringe on our trademark. So,
Yeah. I can use it. So there's a lot to touch up on. Maybe before I start asking my questions, please do the elevator pitch. So for our viewers that have never heard of fears,
Yes.
tell them what fears is and what the brand is about and what watch you make, maybe.
So this is very much I do quite a lot of different watch shows around the world. So things like Wind Up, Time to Watches, British Watchmakers Day. And when someone comes up to stand, they will, the first question is like, oh, are you aware of fears? And if they say no, then, basically you have about 10 seconds to grab their attention.
Yeah.
Because they've got another 120 brands to go and look at. And that's where I'll jump straight in with, so Fears is one of Britain's oldest and youngest watch companies. People kind of look and go, oh, okay. Then the next thing is, originally founded in 1846 by Edwin Fear, ran through 3 generations of the Fear family and closed in 1976. And then 8 years ago, I brought it back to life. At which point people will usually be like, oh, wow, that's interesting. And then I go, oh, and my link to it is I'm the great, great, great grandson of Edwin Fear. And in those 3 sentences, you're covering a lot about the open and transparency of the fact that, we're not claiming to have run non-stop for 179 years. We're also talking about the fact that, what family run business based in England. And then also the fact that it's not a case that I just went out and bought a trademark and revived it. It's actually in the family. It's the same blood running it. And at that point, then we can start talking about the watches, because I think there are different things that draw people to Fears. One is our very old heritage, 1846. So Queen Victoria was in her 20s. As I mentioned before, A. Lange & Söhne were founded the year before. Cartier were founded the year after. And for a young upstart, they're doing pretty well. So, we'll give them that. So there's that. But then we can start talking about the watches we make today, which are very much my interpretation of, if Fears hadn't closed in the 70s, what would it be making today? And that means you look at the archive, and occasionally we'll do a piece that references a specific watch, like the archival, and we'll call it, openly the archival.
Yeah.
But for our other watches, we're going, actually, let's touch on bits of the heritage, but let's look at what we made before and pull out the identifiers. So most people will notice most of our hands on our watch are the same shape.
Yeah.
For 3 decades, Fears used this shape of hand, which we call the Fears hand. The silhouette of our modern Redcliffe is the exact same silhouette as the 2016 Quartz Redcliffe and the classic round watches in the Fears archive. Our cushion case from 1924, brought back, modernized as the Brunswick. So exactly, you know, it's basically going, if Fears hadn't closed, what would it be making today? But also taking into account Fears was a very British company based in Bristol. They used to export all around the world before most companies did. You know, from Brunswick Square premises, they actually had a branch of the post office to handle the shipments to 95 countries around the world.
Amazing.
But at one point, at their real peak, they employed 100 watchmakers in Bristol. So I'm talking a big, sizable organization. And I think that's the thing. I try and run Fears today with the idea of going, there's no point us focusing on becoming this super high-end haute horology, you know, making hundreds of thousands, you know, a few watches at £100,000 plus, when that's not what Fears did before.
Mm-hmm.
You know, Fears was a very solid everyday watch.
Yeah.
And that's what we do. And that's what we build in England today.
How much is done today in current Fears in Bristol or the UK?
Yes. So one of the things that is always very interesting, and certainly I don't know why in particular with British watch companies, everyone's very keen to say, you know, oh, we're a British company, and you know, oh, of course everything's made in England,
Mm-hmm.
which simply can't be the case. Not if you're building, you know, multiple watches a year. And by that I mean, you know, if you're a company like R.W. Smith, Rebecca Struthers,
Mm-hmm.
Garrick,
Mm-hmm.
then they can be making everything in the UK, but they're not making hundreds and thousands of watches a year.
Yeah.
When you get into that area, you have to be reliant on an international supplier network because we don't have those skills in the UK. Now, something we did in 2016, which was quite unusual, is when I restarted the company, I said, right, I'm going to be very open and transparent. So on our website, under each product, there's a spec table. You click a button and it expands. It's got a spec table. And it'll tell you things like, you know, the dimensions of the watch, water resistance, sizes, finishes, that sort of thing. That's what a spec table is meant to do. But we also then will put on it country of origin for all the parts. So we will tell you that our sapphire crystals are made bespoke for us in Hong Kong. And then the anti-reflection coating, which is the best in the business, it's an armor plated coating, which actually costs 2.5 times the cost of the crystal itself.
Yeah.
That's done in Switzerland.
Yeah.
So we're getting the crystal made there, sent to be QC'd in Bristol, goes off to Switzerland, comes back to us. And that's because it's all about working with the best suppliers we can. And for me, it's being very open. You know, we'll get some parts made in Germany, some parts made in Belgium, some parts made in Switzerland. But I'm not ashamed to say, yeah, we get parts made in Hong Kong.
Yeah.
Why? Because some of the best case makers, bracelet makers are based there. And why would I not want to work with the best in the business?
Yeah.
So for me, it's about saying, you know, we do that. But the key thing is we bring the components back to Bristol. Why? Because we don't work with a white labeler. You know, we're not sending off our design. We have an in-house design team and engineering team. And so we have all our parts made for us, except for movements. Movements are customized for us, but obviously it's not an in-house movement. But then when we go and, you know, we get them to make the parts, obviously when we receive the parts, there's always that immediate thing going, hopefully everyone's been working off the same technical drawing so it will fit together, because it can be 20 suppliers to make one watch. But we will then QC all the parts, and anything that fails goes back to the supplier to be repaired, not thrown away and remade, but repaired because of hand finishing.
Yeah.
But then we have full control over the components when they're being assembled by the watchmaker. And key thing, always make sure that the QC is done not by the watchmaker. Don't let the watchmaker mark their own homework. You know, it's
who's
simple.
watching the gatekeepers.
Exactly. You know, it's running, you know, extra hours of time testing. It's, you know, putting all of these things together so that, you know, this is not something that you necessarily see when you look at the watch. I hope over the next decades, those 5 letters on the dial saying Fears will equal that in people's minds. but you notice it when you're wearing the watch and enjoying the watch.
Yeah.
You know, the fact that it does work and it keeps going. So
Yeah.
we're very proud to be, you know, not bringing necessarily the production of the components in house, but bringing the assembly, the quality control, having control on that's very important.
Lovely. So I'm looking at the time.
Yes, so I did talk quite a lot.
No. You're doing a fantastic job. I'm just thinking time-wise because the questions are pouring in. Thank you for that, and please keep them coming. Maybe I want to re-invite you to do a deep dive on this because it's very interesting. Maybe I don't know if it's going to be a question, but maybe I'll answer that question before it's been shot in. Is why we have decided to take up on the invitation to become a Fierce ambassador. I wrote a post yesterday to provoke a bit. I said I did not want to buy more watches. I didn't want more watches for the Ace portfolio. I did not want to love Nicholas. I did not want to love his team. And I do have not one but two. I bought these even before we had talks about being a retailer. Yeah. I bought this as a private person. I do love Nicholas because we had the honor to hang out. Obviously, we met also through the Real Time Show, so the other podcast that is not affiliated to Ace. And I met your team. And with that, I got an in-depth look into the company's soul.
Yes.
You do all the designs in-house. Lee is one of the best.
He's incredible.
He's modest. He's one of the best.
Yes.
Your sales, your marketing, PR are the best. As a consumer, I received your packaging, which is Ace level, means good packaging, high quality, elegant, wrapped with a ribbon.
Oh, yes.
No tape.
No tape.
Handwritten note.
Yes.
So you see the devil's in the details, and you guys do everything to the best of the ability. So you were talking about price points, and you chose yourself a difficult market.
Oh, yes.
Because it's not on the low end. It's at the beginning of the high end. It is high end, actually. But I invite and urge everyone not to judge Fierce, especially the watches, based on pictures. Yes. Go in to fairs, retailers, the Bristol boutique. Come, obviously visit Ace in Amsterdam.
Come and see them.
We have them in stock. And if your eyes are not well off, I'll hand you a loop because it's all about the details. I'm a geek about fonts, but everything is done in-house and you thoroughly think about everything. And for me, the Britishness lies in your slogan. So it's understated and it's elegant.
Yes.
So that's why we took it on. I urge everyone to please come visit us and to see them in the metal. Should we jump to the questions?
Yes, let's jump to it. I always love, this is always the bit. It's like if you're giving a talk or a lecture or something, and then you go, the questions, because I love the curveballs. I love the, it's always the best.
So we'll dive into them because they're fantastic. Tonight you'll get more. We have Daniel, he commented later again, interested in the mix between more heritage designs and contemporary pieces. Is that good feedback for you?
Very, very good feedback. And thank you very much, Daniel, because, for me, it's about, I always describe Fierce as a British luxury watch company with heritage, rather than a British heritage watch company. And sometimes people, when I say that, people may think I'm just having a dyslexic moment and stumbling over my words, but it's a very distinct difference. It's about going, if you look at the automotive sector and, today in Britain, the car companies we have remaining are all heritage luxury companies. If you take a company like Rolls-Royce, it's very forward-looking. It's about craftsmanship. It's very contemporary looking, but it has the heritage behind it. They're not always talking about it. They're not always trying to shove it down your throat as like the main reason to buy it. And I take a lot of inspiration from that.
Interesting. So you actually gave me a perfect segue.
Okay.
Jaguar rebranding.
Oh wow! My goodness, yes. So as someone, I used to own a Jaguar a few years ago. So
How could you know?
I think the thing with Jaguar is people are up in arms because they view Jaguar as always very much in a way, the sort of poor man's Aston Martin or Bentley, right? You know, so it was the idea that once you did good, you could bought a Jaguar and it's a very good car, you know. However, when you look at the sales, I mean, I heard some statistic that I think since 2017, their sales have fallen 80%. You know, last year they sold 13,000 Jaguars in the UK. That makes them a micro brand.
Yeah.
And yet they've got dealerships around the country and stuff. So I think it's one of those things where I always want to ask questions. The people who are the most angry and you've destroyed this great British institution and all this, you kind of want to go, so why are you driving an Audi?
Yeah.
Right. You know, actually, it clearly wasn't working. And Tata Group, who own Jaguar Land Rover, clearly have gone, right, we kind of have a final roll of the dice here. We either have to completely change trajectory or clearly doing more of the same with a bit of a refresh isn't going to work. And I think it's a shame that it's going to be at least 12 months before we see any cars, you know, and people get to experience it. We've obviously seen the concept Type 00. I don't like logos that muddle up letters, you know, capitals not. I think all logos really should be, unless you're Hermes, I think all logos should be capitals, you know, keep it nice and clean. I really liked the Growler, but I like how they've done the leaping Jaguar in the veined piece of metal. I think there's elements of it I really like. I don't personally understand the video and the whole concept, but I think it's fresh, it's eye-catching. I think the car is stunning. You know, I think it is really, is it a Jaguar? I don't know, but I think it looks cool. You know, it looks good. So a bit of me is hoping that when the car actually comes out, people are like, wow, this is amazing. I think at the moment we've got a lot of commentary, and most of this is coming from people in Britain. We don't play with our institutions, don't play with our, you know, how things are. But I think it's a very cold, hard look needs to be placed on, well, why do they feel they need to do this? Well, the sales figures talk for themselves. Therefore, yeah, they needed to do it. So kind of a diplomatic answer. I sort of approve of it, and I'm sort of not, you know.
I think it's a rhetorical question. What did you think of only two colors, and one of them is rather out there, but not for you, because you use that color a lot in your collection?
Yes, yeah, no, exactly. I thought the colors were great. I thought the colors
we had silver and pink, or black and silver.
So pink. It's like I call it like a bluey gray.
Yeah,
it's like a very beautiful color, very like an anodized aluminium blue. And then you've got that wonderful kind of, I call it a cold pink.
Yeah.
And I think with those colors, I was pleased not to see, look, this
not a white car,
not another white car. But the thing is, you know, and I've been thinking a lot about this over the last 8 years with running and growing Fierce, is we're a British company. I'm very proud to be British, but I don't have E-type Jaguars or red telephone boxes in my marketing. I'm what I like to think of as a very much more modern take on Britishness, not the obvious. So I'm glad to see that Jaguar didn't go down the route of British racing green and the, you know, the very obvious, you know, things they could have done. So yeah, I think it's brave. I really genuinely, I have friends who work for Jaguar Land Rover, so I really hope that it's successful for them. And I think it would be nice to see Britain breaking out of that always having to look backwards at tradition.
So interesting that you have an inside view at the company. Tata is an Indian company. It's a mother company. How much did that influence the Britishness of the Land Rover and Jaguar brands and companies? Are they a financial holding? And did they outsource more stuff? Or is it still as British as we want it to be?
No, I mean, the head offices are all in Britain, you know, and nearly everyone working for the company is British. You know, it's very much they're the holding company. But I think it's very interesting when you look at Land Rover, you know, in terms of what they're doing, you know, their new Defender, absolute huge market success. Everyone was sad when they killed off the old one, and the new one is just selling more and more and more. the Range Rover. I mean, the new Range Rovers are stunning. They're so modern, so contemporary, and yet still. And what I like is they've got that little, if you put a 1970s Range Rover next to the brand new model, you can see the DNA.
Yeah, you see the evolution.
And yet it's completely brand new. And I think what they've done is very, very clever. That's what I'm hoping they're going to do with effectively their sister brand, Jaguar.
Yeah.
So
And they're copying that maybe success factor.
Yeah.
Daniel. Well, first of all, compliments to Daniel because he's been watching for an hour almost.
I know.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
We owe you at least a coffee or a stiff drink. He writes, not the Jaguar rebrand can of worms. Really hope they succeed, but to have binned so much brand equity when they may have the best history of British race cars is so sad. Interesting, Daniel. To be continued. We have a blog to watch, our colleagues. Although it's American, the weekly live has to be Rick. He says afternoon. So Rick, welcome from the UK. Thank you for tuning in. Going from another friend to a Dutch friend and watchmaker, aspiring entrepreneur,
Incredible.
Erik van Leeuwen. Hope you come tonight, Erik.
Yes. Yeah, it'd be a pleasure to meet you.
He is about to launch a high-end piece. He is an apprentice to Habring, Maria Richard in Austria.
A company I have so much respect for.
He's the third brand allowed to use the calibers.
Amazing.
He writes, what is currently your biggest market? And do you adapt your designs to local market tastes?
Ooh, interesting. Okay, so our largest market since 2018 has been the United States. Currently today that makes up 60% of our business. The US is very big, very major for us. I still remember when I went to an event a couple of years ago at one of our retailers in America, and I said to them, I feel a bit awkward because everyone's here in kind of like shorts and a t-shirt, and here I am in my Savile Row with my stuck-up British posh accent. And I remember the chap saying, no, don't ever like play down your Britishness. Like this is a wonderful thing about you.
This is the spiel.
This is exactly. But I think to answer the second thing, Eric, how do you adapt design to local market taste? I think it's very important to remember this is a misquote of Henry Ford about if he had asked what he always said, if I asked what my customers wanted, they would have said faster horses.
Yeah.
And I know it's kind of a misquote and whether it's actually him or not, but I think it's a very important thing. Yes, I consume a lot of watch media. I'm very aware of what's going on around in the watch market. But having worked at Rolex for 5 years, you realize one of the successes of Rolex is the fact that, especially during the 70s, 80s, they did what they wanted to do. They were very independent. They said, no, we're going to go down this route. Some people may call that arrogant. I think it's about, you've got to have confidence in what you do, or everything becomes homogenized. Exactly. We see this. I know we keep referring to cars, but actually there are similarities. How many car brands now just look the same with a different name on? And this isn't, GM 1970s badge engineering, where it's literally the same car with a different nose on it. Cars all begin to look the same. And I think, as a watch brand, I go, we will obviously be very respectful and make sure we're not going to do things that are going to offend in local markets. But we're also wanting to ensure we're bringing a bit of Bristol onto someone's wrist wherever they are in the world. When my team and I are here for this evening, unfortunately I don't speak Dutch, but I will be there speaking English, and we're wearing what we would wear in the office. We're trying to bring people into our company, into our world, and therefore part of that is by ensuring that our watches are different. When you put a Fears on, you are wearing a British watch, not a Swiss watch, not a German watch, not an Italian watch, not a French watch, not a Dutch watch. It's about having that individuality. And I believe there is a lot of I think when you look across all kinds of different British brands, and I'm friends with a lot of people who run these companies, yes, we all make something very different, but actually if you really delve into it, they have an innate Britishness to them. And I think if you look at French watch companies, they have a Frenchness to them in the way that, Citroën, Peugeot have as well. German watch companies have a very kind of quite a Teutonic German aesthetic. It's very interesting that actually the nations these watches come from do play into the design and the feel. So a long way to answer your question, Eric, but no, basically we don't adapt our designs to local market tastes. We're very much going, this is what we're wanting to create. And we also know that over time, there are things we will need to make to appeal to a broader audience, but no, I want to make it British.
Long story short, he's making Nicholas watches he likes, and that's how it should be.
And who knows, after tonight, I could be here saying 2025, actually, our largest market is Amsterdam. So, here's hoping.
That's up to our viewers.
Yeah.
The weekly live team of A Block to Watch says it's Scottish, but I didn't say English. I said British. So last time I checked, Scotland is part of the British Empire.
Absolutely. Still.
All kidding aside. So, number 4 of all the other brands in the shop, excluding your own, what captures your attention?
Oh, Van der Klaus. My goodness. What incredible watches. Absolutely incredible. I had the pleasure of meeting Christian Van der Klaus back in 2018-19, before the pandemic.
Yeah.
He was over in London for a Watchmakers Club event organized by David from Garrick Watches. And I remember being impressed with not only the man himself, because the person behind the brand can make or break it for me personally. But again, seeing them today, I was talking to you as you were putting them in the display case, and there's just an elegance, but such creativity and the details that make it fun without being gimmicky. And, the watchmaker, for me, that is, and, you do not see those watches around. It's in as much as, if I'm in London, I can't go and see them. No. So it's such a pleasure to be here today. And I'm looking forward to tomorrow morning having a proper look at them. So
thank you for the question. Hope that answered it. Eric rebuttals by thanking you a lot and see you tonight for sure. Great to see you.
Look forward to seeing you.
We passed the 1 hour. I promise to keep it under 1 hour. One more and then we'll wrap it up. Moritz writes, congratulations on joining forces of both amazing brand and retailer. Can't wait to see your first collab. We put this against the wall, because normally you'll see a door here, but that became my calendar for all the collabs. Should we just be elegantly, understatedly quiet?
I think so.
If you want a Ace Fierce collab, send us a message what you would like to see, and maybe it'll come be a reality.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Nicholas. Thank you so much.
Thank you very much for
sitting down for me. Thank you for all the viewers and listeners. If you're listening this episode as a podcast after it has been aired, if you have any questions or feedback, please send either Nicholas or me or our teams a message. Thank you for all of you that interacted with us. I had a blast, and we're going to continue this party till definitely midnight.
Oh yes.
So thank you.
Thank you very much.
On the backdrop, our mutual buddy Rob Nuts. Thank you, Rob. This time you're not doing the outro. I'm doing the outro. Because if you don't know, Rob and I have an amazing podcast called The Real Time Show. Make sure you listen to it. Nicholas has been on the show. Yes. Lee, his amazing designer, has been on the show.
Yeah. That's a great episode.
And we might record an episode tomorrow. So make sure that you check that out as well. So we have here some live banter going on between A Block to Watch and Rob Nuds, The Real Time Show, although Rob is a Block to Watch alumnus.
Yeah.
So he writes, I'm just jealous. No, you're not. And we know you're kidding. We actually spoke about you last night, Rob, didn't we?
Oh, yes.
Only bad things.
Only bad things, of course.
Love you. Bye.
Take care.